Welcome back, everyone. Dr. Lindner here. We are continuing with the endocrine system, and we're going to look at the relationship here way up at top where we see the hypothalamus, and we'll see that the hypothalamus is going to be able to send hormones to the pituitary. So here in the center is the pituitary, and you'll see these two red boxes. One says anterior lobe of the pituitary, and the other says posterior lobe of the pituitary. And you'll see that most of the hormones are here on the anterior side, and there's a few on the posterior pituitary side. Remember, the other name for anterior pituitary is called the adenohypophysis, and the other name for posterior pituitary is the neurohypophysis. And up here on the top right, you'll see a little key that goes over the abbreviations and what they stand for. And this is kind of important because in healthcare, there are blood tests that we look at, and many times the labs do not write out the name. They'll just write like TSH levels or FSH levels and LH levels and ADH levels. They don't actually write what the abbreviation stands for. So it's really important to know the abbreviations and what they stand for. Okay, so let's go through them so you feel comfortable with it. So on the top right, we see ACTH, which stands for adrenocorticotropic hormone. Now let's look at the word, break it down so you understand the different terms here. Because when you look at the word, sometimes you can kind of figure it out, like where it's coming from, or at least what its function is. So we see the word adreno. When you see adreno, you should be thinking of this gland here, the adrenal gland. And then in the middle, we see the word cortico. And that's because when you look at the adrenal gland, you'll see that there's an adrenal cortex, which is this outer layer. And then on the inside, there's an adrenal medulla. So we have an adrenocorticotropic hormone that the anterior pituitary will release. And adrenocorticotropic hormone is going to stimulate the adrenal cortex to release hormones. Well, what hormones can the adrenal cortex release? Well, glucocorticoids. What are the two big ones? Cortisol, which you're going to be hearing a lot of, cortisol, and cortisone, and corticosterol. These are glucocorticoids. So what do they have the ability to do? Gluco. When you hear the word gluco, you should be thinking of glucose. They have the ability of increasing your blood sugar. Why does your body need increased blood sugar? Well, energy, for energy production. If you're in a fasting state and you're under stress and you're being chased by a tiger, you better be able to get out of danger's way. So glucocorticoids are produced. The cortisol can increase your blood pressure. It can increase your cholesterol. It can increase your blood sugar, right? So think of it. You haven't even eaten, but just this one hormone by itself, the cortisol, can increase your blood pressure, your heart rate, your blood sugar, and cholesterol. Now think about that for a long period of time. Now you know why stress can kill, right? Look at those physiological effects. All right. TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. So the hypothalamus is going to send a signal here to the anterior lobe, and it's going to be sending thyroid releasing hormone, TRH. So the hypothalamus sends thyroid releasing hormone to the anterior lobe of the pituitary. The anterior lobe receives the TRH and says, all right, we're going to push out thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone hits a receptor on the thyroid gland, and it tells the thyroid gland to release something. And it's going to release T4 primarily. T4 is thyroxin. And T4 can be converted into T3. It is selenium dependent, selenium, and that conversion from T4 to T3 takes place predominantly in the liver. Predominantly in the liver. The liver can convert T4 into T3. The thyroid can make some T3, but not as much as the liver, believe it or not. And your thyroid is involved in regulating your metabolism. You've heard of people that have a hyperactive thyroid or a hypoactive thyroid. When someone has a hypoactive thyroid, these are the people that say they just think about chocolate cake and they gain weight, right? Or they think about food and they gain weight. And then you have people with a hyperactive thyroid that can eat and eat and eat and eat and they never put on a pound, right? So this thyroid is involved in regulating metabolism. What about growth hormone? So your anterior pituitary can push out growth hormone, and growth hormone, especially when we sleep, has the ability of rejuvenating a lot of our cartilage cells and muscles and tendons. It just rejuvenates the body. So growth hormone can affect the liver, and the liver produces something called somatomedins, and they're involved in regenerating bone, muscle, and tissues of the body. And growth hormone is pushed out about 50 minutes after a person naps. Okay, and that's why athletes may take a nap in the daytime. That's why babies constantly nap, because when they sleep, they push out growth hormone, and that's where growth takes place. We have prolactin, PRL. When you look at the word prolactin, you see pro, which means for, and lactin for lactation. So prolactin has the ability of influencing the mammary glands of the breast to produce milk. It's for milk production. The anterior pituitary can push out follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. So we have FSH, follicular stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. These affect both the male and female reproductive organs. So FSH is going to affect the testes, and it will also affect the ovaries in the female. So will LH, which is luteinizing hormone. It affects both the testes and the ovaries. FSH and LH on the male side can help produce testosterone and inhibin, right? The word inhibin, to inhibit the production of. And both FSH and LH will stimulate the ovaries to produce the female sex hormones like estrogen and progesterone, as well as inhibin, right? LH is that hormone that's produced, and women can buy these dipsticks. They can urinate in a cup, take an LH litmus dipstick, dip it in the urine to see if her LH levels are spiking or not. When the LH levels are high, this means the woman is ovulating. And ovulation is like a 24-hour period. Okay, that means that's when the ovary pushes out an egg into the fallopian tube. And there's only like a 24-hour window, maybe a little bit more, that a woman can get pregnant. So when the LH level spikes, it's like, oh my gosh, this is the time for a planned pregnancy to take place. Okay. On the posterior pituitary side, we have anti-diuretic hormone, ADH, anti-diuretic. You know what a diuretic is, right? A diuretic makes you lose water, like alcohol and coffee. Those are diuretics. And high blood sugar, those are diuretics. Anti-diuretic is going to allow you to hold on to water. Now, when you hold on to water, a general rule of thumb that I want you to think of is when you hold on to water, you're going to be holding on to minerals. And when you lose water, you're going to lose minerals. Okay, when you think of minerals, I want you to thinking of like sodium and calcium. Okay, those are minerals. If you're wherever water goes, minerals will follow, just like mineral water, right? You have water flowing down a river or a stream, it hits the rocks and pulls out minerals from the rocks. It's mineral water. So we have anti-diuretic hormone that will affect the kidneys, and either the kidneys will release water and you'll urinate, or it'll retain water, right? It has the ability of losing or retaining. Okay, but anti-diuretic hormone is going to say, hey, let's hold on to the water. And if you're holding on to water, you're going to be holding on to some minerals. The posterior pituitary also releases oxytocin. Remember, the oxytocin was produced by the hypothalamus, but it's stored in the neurohypophysis. When oxytocin is released, it has the ability of affecting both the male reproductive and the female reproductive. On the female side, it's going to make the smooth muscle of the uterus contract, and it makes the mammary glands contract. In the male reproductive, it's going to make the smooth muscle in the vas deferens, aka the ductus deferens, and the prostate gland contract. Okay, and melanocyte, I skipped this one, the melanocyte stimulating hormone, most textbooks will link it to the anterior pituitary. Some of the functions a little bit uncertain, but they believe that it has something to do with the melanocytes in terms of darkening the skin. Okay, so when we look at growth hormone, GH, that's going to stimulate liver, muscle, cartilage, bone, and other tissues to synthesize and secrete insulin-like growth factors. Not insulin, but insulin-like growth factors, which in turn promotes growth of the body tissue. So basically, your growth hormone is involved in regenerating your cartilage cells and your muscles and your bones and making these things rejuvenated and renewed. When we look at thyroid stimulating hormone, this is involved in, it stimulates the synthesis and the secretion of thyroid hormones by the thyroid gland, right? And we think of T4, which is thyroxine, which gets converted to T3, primarily in the liver, and we know that it's selenium dependent. T3 is called triiodothyronine. FSH, follicular stimulating hormone. In females, it initiates the development of the oocyte, which is the egg, and induces ovarian secretion of estrogens. And in the male, it stimulates the testes to produce sperm. LH, in the female, it stimulates the secretion of estrogen, progesterone, ovulation, and the formation of the corpus luteum. In the male, it stimulates the testes to produce testosterone. Prolactin, PRL, it's involved in promoting milk production. Now, when we look at the adrenal gland, we'll see that there's an outer shell to it, right? This portion, which is the adrenal cortex. And then in the middle, that little triangle in the middle is the adrenal medulla. So the adrenal cortex is involved in producing glucocorticoids, mainly cortisol. Melanocyte stimulating hormone is involved in causing darkening of the skin. They also feel that it has some influence in influencing brain activity. Okay. Here's our oxytocin and our ADH. The oxytocin stimulates contraction of the smooth muscle cells of the uterus during childbirth. It stimulates the contraction of the cells within the mammary glands to help eject the milk. That's the oxytocin. And the ADH, anti-diuretic, is going to conserve body water by decreasing urine volume. It's going to decrease water loss through perspiration, and it's involved in raising blood pressure by constricting the arterioles. Okay? Okay, when we come back, we'll talk about negative and positive feedback loops.